Hi everyone and welcome to the second video in our installment looking at exchange rate theory. In the last video what we did, we looked at different types of exchange rate system. So fixed, floating and managed. We looked at how governments might manipulate a currency value, how they might fix it through the use of buying and selling foreign currency, but also by manipulating interest rates. And we also looked at other factors that will influence a currency value by using demand and supply diagrams. In this video, what we're going to focus on are the impacts or the consequences of currencies changing in value. Right now, what I would like to do, please, is to kick off by having draw me two aggregate demand, aggregate supply diagrams. Think about how a currency getting stronger, so an appreciation or a revaluation, could impact on the macroeconomy. Think about which way AD should move, which way short-run aggregate supply would move. And then B, exactly the same, but for a depreciation or a devaluation, which way should AD move, which way should short-run aggregate supply move. Right, when you're happy, hit play and we'll carry on. Right, you've got here the impacts of a currency losing value. It's worth remembering, everyone, this could be either a depreciation, which where market forces will lower currency value. That could be caused by demand moving inwards, or it could be caused by supply moving outwards, or a combination of both. It could also be a devaluation, which where the central bank or the government deliberately manipulate the currency value downwards. That could be by lowering interest rates, or it could be by selling the domestic currency on global markets and buying up more foreign currency. Now, anyway, on the diagram then, you can see the impact on aggregate demand, aggregate supply. So let's assume the currency, for whatever reason, loses value. So it falls from £1 is worth $1.50 to £1 becomes $1. Now think about the impact on a current account first of all. We should be thinking here about whipped egg. Weak pound, imports dear, exports cheap. So if imports become more expensive, there should be a fall in demand for them. If exports become cheaper, well, there should be growing demand for these goods across the world. Well, think about the formula for aggregate demand: C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Well, if there's less imports coming in and more exports going out, then overall there should be an outward shift in aggregate demand. And we might benefit from export-led growth, but also domestic firms will start to produce more due to growing domestic demand for goods and services as well. Now, as AD moves outwards, we then expect to experience actual economic growth. So that extra export demand and domestic demand would lead to AD moving outwards, but that's higher GDP. But also on the back of that, that should create more jobs. So to produce more exports and more domestic goods, that means more people need to work in the economy. But on top of that, you're going to get more multiplier effects. Because remember, exports are an injection and imports are withdrawal. If imports start to fall, the multiplier effect will start to get bigger. So again, that should spear more growth in aggregate demand. We also create demand pull inflation. So AD moving outwards will create demand pull inflation. Well, that could potentially be, a problem for the UK economy. But also, with imports becoming more expensive, this will increase business costs. So our firms have to import lots of raw materials, semi-finished goods and services, commodities into the economy. Well, as these things become more expensive, that would lead to SRAS moving inwards. So we can see from the diagram, everyone, that AD will move outwards because of less importing, more exporting, but SRAS will move inwards due to higher business costs. So when the currency gets weaker, we'll experience both demand pull and cost push inflation. Now, what we'd also expect there would be another reason for growth in aggregate demand would be more foreign direct investment. What we know is when the currency gets weaker, it becomes cheaper to make investments into the UK. So Americans have got to sacrifice fewer American dollars to buy our currency to invest here. Well, more investment will also create a growth in AD because the formula is C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So more investment would lead to a growth in aggregate demand. Now, clearly, everyone, if a currency was to get stronger, we're going to get the opposite impact. So a stronger currency would mean that AD will move inwards and SRES will move outwards. Right, now everything that I've said so far will hopefully sound perfectly plausible, but we're now going to complicate matters a little bit. Look at the diagram again. This is what we would expect to happen when a currency gets weaker. The current account should improve because importing will become more expensive, and exporting will become importing will become more expensive, and exports will become cheaper. So Whippedeck, imports dearer, exports cheaper. That should improve current account performance and lead to AD moving outwards and SRAS moving inwards. Well, the extent to which it will improve trade performance is a little bit debatable. So we're now going to be thinking about the consequences of a currency getting weaker by looking at a diagram called the J curve and considering something that we call the Marshall-Lerner condition. Now, what the Marshall-Lerner condition says is, well, actually, a currency becoming weaker will only improve trade performance if the sum of the price elasticity of demand for imports and exports is greater than 1. Now, we're going to explain that by looking at the J curve. Now, on the vertical axis, we've got the trade performance, exports minus imports. What we're looking at now, though, are the value of exports and imports as opposed to the volume of imports and exports. Remember, volume are the number of imports and exports, whereas value would be the volume multiplied by the price. So we're looking at the spending on imports and exports. Now, what we've got here then, we've got 0 in the middle of the diagram. Anything above 0 would signal a trade surplus. The value of exports exceeds the value of imports. Anything below 0 would show a trade deficit. So the value of exports are less than the value of imports. On the horizontal axis, we're measuring time. So time since the currency becoming weaker. Now, what you'll notice is, well, actually, at point A on the J curve, when we lower the currency value, it might actually worsen our overall trade performance. What we're assuming here is the condition has not been. Eventually, to point B on the J curve, the weak currency will eventually improve trade performance. Right, and let's think about point A then, first of all. So point A on the J curve, where the Marshall-Lerner condition is not met, it's for these reasons here. So the trade performance will get worse for these reasons. And that is because imports and exports tend to be price inelastic in the short run. And we'll think about what this means on diagrams in a moment or two. Now, the logic would be that when the currency becomes weaker, there should be a fall in demand for imports because they become more expensive. But the problem is that UK firms will use the global supply chain to buy foreign goods and services. Just because the currency becomes weaker and these things become more expensive to buy, it doesn't mean that our firms can adjust their buying. They might have long-term contracts with suppliers across the world. There might not be a domestic supplier that can produce these goods and services that they need. So in the short run, the logic would be that imports are price inelastic. Our firms will struggle to lower their demand for the foreign imports that we need in our economy. Further to this, exports might also be price inelastic. Foreign consumers will not adjust automatically to UK goods becoming cheaper across the world. So guys, the overall idea is in the short run, trade performance might worsen because imports and exports are price inelastic. Now, these next two diagrams will hopefully show you exactly what we mean. Now, think about what Whippedeck assumes. Weak pound, imports dear, exports cheap. Now, you've got in the first diagram, import demand, the demand for imports, and we've got a price inelastic demand curve. Imports become more, price grows from P1 to P2. It will contract our demand a little bit, but demand will not fall significantly. Now, there has been a slight reduction in the volume of imports that have been bought. Demand has fallen from Q1 to Q2, but the value of them will increase. In other words, the spending on imports will actually grow. Area A shows the extra spending that takes place, whereas B shows the benefits of buying fewer imports. So even though the volume of imports has fallen, the spending or the value of imports actually started to increase. Now look at the export one, the second diagram. As exports fall in price from P1 to P2, there will not be a significant increase in demand. So we gain area B, that's extra spending on our goods and services, the exports increasing, but A is the money that we lose from them exports falling in price. So again, even though the volume of exports has increased, the value of them was actually fallen. We're generating less foreign currency than we were before on our exports. So guys, in the short run on the J curve, the idea is when the currency gets weaker, fair play, there will be a fall in demand for imports. There will be a growing demand for exports, but the spending on imports will actually go up. And the foreign money that we generate from our exports will actually go down. So even though the volume is moving in the right direction, the value is moving in the wrong direction. So trade deficit will actually get worse. Now, in the long run, point B, the idea would be eventually over time that imports and exports will become more price elastic. They will become more responsive to changes in price. And that would lead to trade performance improving in the long term. Now, we can explain that by using these demand curves now. So you can now see that the demand for imports and exports have become more elastic. So look what happens now in the long run. The idea would be as price levels increase from P1 to P2 due to the weaker currency, then there will be a significant reduction in the demand for these imported goods and services. We're giving domestic firms more time to find domestic suppliers rather than foreign suppliers. We can move more towards domestic production rather than foreign production. So the idea will be in the long run, the money that we save from demanding fewer imports is area B. There'll be a bit of extra spending in A, but area B exceeds area A. So this time, the value of imports will actually start to go down. But also foreigners will become more responsive to cheaper import prices. British exports are now cheaper, but they can respond more to them price reductions, and they will spend more on British goods and services. Right, if I go back to the J curve, then everyone, area A shows that in the short run, when a currency gets weaker, even though the volume of imports will fall and the volume of exports will increase, the value of imports will actually grow and the value of exports will actually fall. So A on the J curve will show us the trade deficit actually getting bigger. The Marshall-Lerner condition has not been met, and that is because imports and exports are price inelastic in demand. On B, it shows in the long run, as the demand for imports and exports becomes more price elastic, then the idea would be is that trade performance will start to improve. So now we're going to see a reduction in the spending on imports, but we're going to see the value of our exports start to grow. So point B, everyone, the Marshall-Lerner condition is achieved and trade performance will actually start to improve. Now, I've seen exam questions on this topic in the past, which will say, discuss the extent to which a weaker currency will improve trade performance. The answer will be, well, it will do, assuming the Marshall-Lerner condition is achieved. On the diagram, it will be at point B, but not at point A. So only in the long run, when imports and exports start to become price elastic, will trade performance improve when currency starts to get weaker. Right, guys, just to wrap up this video, then here, what I would like to now do is to hit pause and put down your answers to these questions here. Once you're happy, that will be the end of the video. So A, draw a fully labelled J curve. B, explain the difference between value and volume. You could link that to importing and exporting. C, explain why in the short run, a currency becoming weaker will not improve trade performance. Think about it in terms of the Marshall-Lerner condition is not met. Imports and exports are price inelastic in demand. You could link in the value against volume of imports and exports there. D, explain why eventually on the J curve, trade performance will improve if currency stays weak. You could think here about volume against value again of imports and exports. You could link it to the Marshall-Lerner condition being achieved. And then finally, what actually is the Marshall-Lerner condition? What are we looking at with the Marshall-Lerner condition? Right, guys, I'll stop there. So thank you very much for watching.